Due to COVID, there has been an increase in hate crimes towards minority communities, in particular the Asian community. This leaves the victims in these communities isolated and makes it harder for them to access help. What will you do to combat this and ensure that the people from these communities get the help that they deserve?
I think that's a massively valid point. And one of the things that is very key as an element to my campaign is the fact that it is fully inclusive. And that is, be it on the basis of race, gender identity, sex, anything, whatever issue that you would ask if that is inclusive, that is very much where I'm at the heart of. And that is about, the key is to recognise where those issues fit within those different minority groups as well, and how to affect them. So it could be that if you've got a Muslim lady who is the subject, the victim of domestic abuse, not just societal abuse, but be it wider, that she has been attacked in the streets or verbally abused, or there's something at home, there is a slightly different issue around how that community can sometimes view that person. So again, it's about looking at how are we dealing with groups, and there isn't a one size fits all answer to this. And I think it's awareness of different cultures, awareness of different norms for people, awareness of different beliefs. And in the same way that across other parts of organizations, we would have an awareness of how to deal with those issues. So it's something like, it's the organisation Tell Mama are very, very good at explaining not just about how to get help if you are a minority group who is subject to abuse, but it also is very informative to individuals, how to support if that's something that's going on, and how to be there to do that. And I think that's something, again, it comes back to education and information, to explain to people, if you see something going on, what do you do? And how do you interact, and how do you support? If you're aware of more domestic violence, how do you support in that instance? And I think that's, we as a society, and we've seen over the last year, are generally good, and we want to help, but sometimes we don't know how to, or we're afraid to. And I remember reading a really good infographic about, if you see someone who is being racially abused in public, as we saw a spate of horrible things on buses and trains before lockdown, you might not have the confidence to go and challenge the person who's doing that. But the advice was about, go and sit with the person who's there, engage them, talk to them one-to-one, have that eye contact, empathize, support in a very quiet and unobtrusive and unthreatening way, but just sort of, be there and be support. That's something we need to get out as a message to society as a whole, as to where do we go and what do we do, and how do we act in society-wide to do that. So it's not just about me as mayor saying I would do this or I would do that. I think what we need is campaigns around education and promotion of the best way for us all to do that, because I genuinely believe, and if I'm naive, so be it, that actually we are good and people do want to help, they just don't know how to. So that's where I would put the focus on, is to empower more people to just do those initial acts, and to take those first steps, and then we can look at where we again support, build and add to that on a more direct campaign and messaging process.
I want to say first off, I think it's abhorrent, some of this behaviour, and I have seen some of it. And I think, last year I mean, if you check on my Facebook page, I actually wrote something last May, June, July, and it's linked. It's on Lib Dem Voice, and it was about the Black Lives Matter protests at the time, and there was a lot of debate then about should they be protesting during a pandemic, and I went, of course they should. If it had been my community, and I'm part of the LGBT community, that had been under attack, I would have protested. I mean, I was in Piccadilly Gardens for some of those protests, and it was safe, and I didn't feel unsafe there. I just wanted to say that, because how do we combat divisions in our society? And I was having this conversation with two people from MEND, which is the Muslim Engagement Network, the other week, and we were talking about it, and I think, look, so much has changed over the past 20 years for you know, people from a Muslim background, that we really need to get back to basics. And actually, it's a really difficult subject, but it's not a difficult subject at the same time. I'm finding it hard to put my words in into context. Community outreach is definitely the first port of call, and I think those community hub with multiple agencies working together, working in communities to actually build trust, build understanding, and build involvement would be a key first step. But we have a wider issue in this country with race, and I can't solve that on my own. And it needs to be dealt with. And I think the past 5-6 years have opened up a Pandora's box, and I don't think it's going to be silenced quickly. But weathering it and standing up against it, and actually calling it out, is something we can all do, and do it visibly. Sorry, that wasn't as in-depth as I think you deserved, but
It's fine, but can I get you to promise that you will stand up against it, rather than, say you will and then not do that?
I will say what I said to those ladies. I've always stood up against racism. It's not, I've always stood up against ignorance and hate, because there's no need for it in society. Whether it is religious hate, whether it is a racial hate, sexism, and LGBT hate as well, and homophobia. I think at the moment, I mean, a lot of friends and colleagues in the trans community are dealing with a lot of hate and a lot of nastiness, and I always talk to them, and I'm saying, well, what can I do? What can I actually do to help you? Because coming along, giving you a pat on the back seems like it's patronizing, but some of them say, you know what, sometimes all we just want is someone to tell us it's going to be okay, and a safe place to actually retreat to. And I hope that, yes, if I say this is wrong, everyone should stop doing this, that makes, if that's a happy place for you, then that's an easy thing for me to say, because I'll always say that.
So we are really clear that we have a zero tolerance approach to hate crime of any kind. And I think this is one area where we can say, Greater Manchester Police do follow through on that. We take any hate crime with the absolute seriousness. There is an issue, though, of course, in terms of confidence amongst people within those communities who may not feel they can come forward. So I think there's more to be done to support people and to give people confidence to come forward. We've recently published a gender-based abuse strategy, which I would encourage you to have a look at, because it's out for consultation at the moment. That is about working with women's groups, groups who represent women from minority communities who perhaps who don't feel empowered to come forward. We are looking at what more we can do to empower them to be able to report crime, hate crime, where that's happening. So it's a big theme for us at the moment. And I just think on the question of domestic abuse or violence against women and girls more broadly, I just want to say this. I recognise that the people who can do most to improve women's safety are men and boys. There's just no getting away from that. It's a fact. And we mustn't shy away from saying that, or indeed having that conversation. So I have said as part of this that if re-elected, I will lead personally a high-profile campaign targeted at men and boys across Greater Manchester to say, think about how your behaviour might make somebody feel. Because sometimes maybe we don't think enough about how our behaviour might make someone else feel. And I think that's really a conversation that needs to be had, because I know what the truth of what you're saying. It's the case that in some parts of our city region, women, but particularly women from different minority backgrounds, will not feel safe, and we need to do something about that.